Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
The autumn wind was howling mournfully and tossing litter abandoned by someone along the waterfront. The sky was cloudy and seemed dissatisfied with something. Perhaps it was sensing the mood of the lonely man strolling along the waterfront. He was dressed modestly, inexpensively, but warmly, so that the chilly weather wouldn't distract him from his thoughts. For some reason, Armando Fuentes loved the old-fashioned hat with brims and a sturdy coat in the autumn. In this attire, he looked like some detective or journalist from the 70s. However, he was neither a detective nor a journalist and considered these professions unworthy. Armando was a surgeon. The workload in the public hospital was enormous, so lately, he enjoyed relieving stress after work with solitary walks like these. It was especially difficult on days when a patient died on the operating table. His way of calming down was a simple thing: water. More precisely, contemplating it. The calm flow of the local rivers soothed him, evoked thoughts of the transience of this world, and distracted him from the daily hustle and bustle that had turned into an endless struggle with death for human bodies and, as a result, souls. The surgeon was overwhelmed by black melancholy. Someone would say it was a midlife crisis. But not long ago, Armando was satisfied with his life. He had everything he could wish for: a wife, a beloved job that was also his calling. He didn't make money the meaning of his life, and they actively avoided him because of it. Yes, he wasn't rich. Armando Fuentes was always attracted to asceticism, minimal household comfort, and nothing more. His wife Gabby had been with him since he was a student, and she shared his high ideals and unpretentious life, though she tried periodically to turn him into a person rather than a free scalpel, as she teased. Armando didn't resist, but he didn't express enthusiasm either. He didn't care about the wealth of the patient lying on the operating table, so there was no parity before someone else's wealth. And because of that, he didn't thrive in private clinics, where his wife vigorously promoted him. And every time he returned to his old, shabby city hospital, where ordinary people almost prayed for his talent, Gabby sincerely and selflessly envied the surgeon for his work. "Armando, I don't trust you." "No sane person would sleep and work at the office like this," the wife complained. "Gabby, sweetheart, there's a job and there's a calling." "I suppose that's the case with me," the doctor shrugged off his wife's attacks. Dr. Fuentes generally disliked conflicts and avoided them at all costs, considering them a waste of time. Gabrielle, on the other hand, seemed to crave them, perhaps due to an excess of free time. "Well, what kind of calling is that?" "To save people. You know, people die, are dying, and will always die. But we don't live either. Armando, I'm tired. I want a real family. I want children, after all. But even children are an unaffordable luxury for us with your schedule and our income." "What's wrong with our income?" "What's wrong? We don't have any. Do you understand? With your talents, we could live like decent people, closer to the capital or even in the capital itself, instead of freezing in this rundown little apartment. Do we need that? You know I don't make friends with money. And you don't make friends with money. You have to earn it. But we're not starving, Gabby. But we're not living either, Armando. I'm ashamed to talk to old friends, to endure their ridicule. Because you were the best in college, but ended up with the worst job. It turns out that you're just burying your talent here. And what's keeping you? People who need help. Maybe it's the beautiful nurses holding onto you." His wife found another reason to start a fight, and the argument took on the characteristics of jealousy. "You're always tired for me. So you must be cheating on me. Are they assisting you well enough?" The modest Fuentes blushed. "Gabby, let's not go there. I am faithful to you and only you. But I really do get tired. And you see how drained I am after hours of surgery." "I see. You save everyone but your own wife." But you love me, and I love you. The surgeon wearily smiled at his wife, whom he genuinely loved and in such moments truly felt guilty in front of the woman of his life. Yes, or else I would have left and been happy by now. But instead, I'm suffering. Armando approached her and hugged his wife tightly. This is usually how their fights ended. Years went by, and this year, Gabby couldn't take it anymore. She found a lover. She became cold to Armando and, after a little bit of pretending and torturing herself with guilt, she confessed everything. Naturally, Armando was to blame for working too much, not paying attention, and not giving gifts. Gabrielle had plenty of complaints. And Armando sat and stayed silent. He felt empty inside. In many ways, the woman he loved and who betrayed him was right. Except for one thing, he didn't betray her, he didn't cheat, and he didn't destroy anything. They divorced quickly since they had no children together and no common property to divide. Now Armando only had work left. And it was the only thing that didn't let him sink into the depths of depression. He took on any surgeries, stayed at work day and night. On rare visits home, he noticed that his apartment was covered in dust and looked like the lair of a giant spider. By autumn, the pain of loss had subsided a bit, and the doctor began to devote more time to his personal life. The medical staff, who rushed to assist in surgeries, were glad that Dr. Fuentes was getting better. After all, they didn't share Armando's unhealthy enthusiasm. And so Armando Fuentes came to his melancholic meditations. On this day, his thoughts were particularly light. Armando saved a 50-year-old man who nearly killed himself with typical male indifference to medical examinations and let himself go so much that an urgent operation was needed. Armando didn't immediately notice someone tugging at his sleeve. At first hesitantly, then more insistently. It interrupted his thoughts and the man looked towards the source of his concern. A 6 or 7-year-old girl with big eyes stood before him in the middle of a deserted waterfront. She held a piece of paper with a childlike drawing, and her coat pockets stuck out with colorful pencils. She wasn't exactly dirty and unkempt, but she looked poor. Her clothes were ill-fitting and patched in places, and it was clear that they weren't bought in a store, but from other people. "Hello, sir. Buy a picture. You look sad. Maybe it will help you." "I tried my best, honestly." The little beggar turned to Dr. Fuentes. The doctor understood that the girl was simply a beggar, but it was extremely surprising. The child didn't want to beg for money. At such a young age, she was trying to earn a living. The man valued people who were eager to work hard and earn money honestly. He was such a person himself and therefore respected those who were kindred spirits. "Hello, little girl," the doctor smiled sincerely. "Well, if you tried your best, then I will buy it, of course. But promise not to spend the hard-earned money on any junk. I don't have much, but I'll give you all that I have. Do we have a deal?" "Of course." "You are kind," the girl agreed with a serious face. He had some money with him, but he gave it all away. He was waiting for his salary at the end of the week, but there were some groceries at home. Armando walked to work, so he decided to somehow make it through the rest of the week. He handed the little girl some money, and she gave him a drawing. Sparks of gratitude shone in the child's eyes, and she ran to the nearest bench to draw her next masterpiece. Dr. Fuentes didn't stay on the waterfront any longer. The child filled his day with a bright mood. And now the doctor had a strong desire to go and clean up his spider's lair. The surgeon mechanically rolled up the child's drawing into a tube without even looking at its content. He appreciated the simple childhood aspiration to earn money, but not the talent in visual arts. He put the drawing in his pocket, deciding to attach it to the fridge regardless of its content. One could just throw away a child's effort. Let the child's hand be a reminder to him that there is still much good and light in this world. Armando didn't think at that moment that a simple child's drawing would become the beginning of a series of events. After all, most people just threw away such crafts, although they also valued children's work. He came home, brewed coffee, and quickly made himself sandwiches. He remembered the drawing and decided to appreciate the little girl's talent. Looking at the drawing, Armando was stunned and extremely saddened. The beggar had talent. Yes, she still had a long way to go if she entered an art school, and he sincerely wished her that. Such goodness cannot be wasted. It needs to be honed and guided by the skilled hands of a teacher. But nevertheless, the girl managed to create a simple, childlike, but still complete composition. The drawing depicted a household scene. On one side, it was typical for the environment in which children live in troubled families. And on the other, it made the hairs on the experienced surgeon's head stand on end. The girl drew a man with a bottle with a beautiful inscription, vodka on the table, and a woman in a wheelchair. The most interesting thing was that they were not entirely a man and a woman. The child apparently looked at fairy tale pictures and interpreted the man and woman as animals. So, the man turned out to be a hefty bear, baring his teeth to the fox woman who was fawningly smiling at the bear. It still reminded him of a picture from a children's cartoon. Armando understood the child's consciousness compensated for the unattractive picture of reality with images of animals. Her drinking father, possibly a stepfather, and her mother in a wheelchair. Oh, what an insurmountable sadness! Compared to the young artist's troubles, Dr. Fuentes' own problems seemed to be easy to solve. At least he was an established adult man. What could a little girl solve? The next day, Armando went to the same place with the goal of meeting the girl again. Apparently, the spot was profitable as she was wandering around the same area, unsuccessfully trying to attract indifferent passers-by to her begging. In the doctor's mind, the girl was now associated with a little agile mouse. "Hello, young artist," greeted her Armando. "Oh, hello." The little beggar jumped in surprise. She was so used to being ignored that this meeting was unexpected for her. "I liked your drawing." "Really?" The child looked at the stranger with disbelief. "Usually, people throw away my drawings." "No, it took an honorable place on my fridge," the doctor smiled. "You're the first person who ever said that. People are indifferent, even when they help." "Yes, I understand. But I wanted to ask you something about the drawing. Your mom and dad are in it, right? You didn't just come up with the animals to draw, did you?" "Right," the girl murmured quietly and looked at the adult man questioningly. The child was already suspicious of the surrounding reality, expecting a catch, not help. "I don't wish anything bad for you," Dr. Fuentes tried to calm the girl. "My name is Armando Fuentes. You can call me Armando." "I'm Esther." "You are quick-witted, sir, and the first one to ask. Nobody really looks at my drawings. I tried hard and got money, and I should keep trying more. But my pictures end up in the trash can. I've seen it myself. But it's okay, I like drawing. And in the picture, it's my mom and stepfather." "Stepfather, I see," muttered Armando. "Yes, he drinks a lot and growls at us like a wild animal. We're afraid of him. He makes me beg for money, but my mom gets a pension that he also spends on alcohol. And we want to eat. Armando, I don't want to beg, I just want to draw pictures. Drawing is better than begging." "Esther, you're a good girl, but why is your mom in a wheelchair?" "She was hit by a car. She's beautiful, but 6 months ago she was walking home from the store in the evening, and a car hit her at the pedestrian crossing. They never found the culprit, and now my mom can only move around in a wheelchair. I love her very much. She's the most beautiful and kindest person I know. And she doesn't have a dad or a mom." "Why?" "She told me she lived in an orphanage. A place where children live when they have no parents." An awkward pause hung in the air. Dr. Fuentes feverishly thought about how he could help in this situation. Despite his experience and the countless deaths and trials he had seen in his surgery, he had not become callous. He was still capable of empathy and the desire to do good. It was precisely this trait that had led him to medicine. Now, it pushed him towards a strange adventure. Any other person would have scratched their head and walked away. Nobody owes anyone anything. But what will happen to this girl if she grows up in a world where nobody owes anyone anything? He would at least try. Esther, I suggest we agree about something, said Armando. What is it, Armando? Asked Esther. Let me accompany you to your mother. I am a doctor, perhaps I can help her in some way. Are you not trying to deceive me? Esther asked cautiously. Why would I deceive you? We will make a deal. I will try to heal your mother, and in return, you will draw a nice picture where you and your mother are running together. Agreed? Armando smiled. Agreed, replied Esther, her eyes sparkling with hope. And also, my stepfather has been hitting my mother a lot lately, Esther added, handing the doctor a drawing of a wolf hitting a bunny in a stroller, with a scared expression on its face. The doctor took a few deep breaths to calm down and contain the anger that surged within him. They didn't have to go far. Esther had tried to choose a familiar area to sell her drawings, but far enough from home to avoid embarrassment in front of acquaintances. The area where she lived was on the outskirts of the city, an industrial neighborhood where stories like hers were not uncommon. As soon as they entered the entrance, the strong smell of alcohol hit their noses. Dr. Fuentes was sure that this smell was just the tip of the iceberg. Needles, cigarette butts, and trash were simply invisible to him as he walked from the bright street into the dimly lit building. Armando was luckier than Esther. He didn't grow up in such a ghetto. However, he often had to fight with the bullies who grew up in these dirty panel buildings during his school and college years. Esther fumbled with the keys and a few moments later turned the key in the lock. Behind her, between the railings on the upper floors, a discarded cigarette butt flew by. The hallway of the apartment was not much different in decor and contents from the entrance, the same cigarette butts underfoot, the same dirt. The difference was in the wallpaper, which had been glued in the old days but had long since become a palette of human sloppiness. Greasy stains, streaks, dirty smudges, and rare spots of blood made up the pattern of this unfortunate dwelling. Fuentes was amazed that a child could grow up in such a pigsty. Was this girl to blame for the fact that adults had steadfastly decided to degrade themselves into animals? The man came from the kitchen and said with a gruff, alcohol voice, Esther, why are you back so early? Did you earn anything? Doubts about where the last money Armando had given the girl had gone vanished. He felt disappointed that his kind gesture had gone to waste. There are people who are unworthy of such actions. The owner of the voice appeared in the hallway. He was a man about the same age as the doctor. He really looked like a bear and a wolf at the same time. Like a bear, he had a big and cumbersome figure that was more flabby than muscular from constant drinking, with a bloated face. From the wolf, he inherited a thick, graying mane and yellowish eyes with red veins. Who did you bring here, you little snake? He roared. The girl hid behind Dr. Fuentes and peeked out fearfully from behind the man's leg. The enraged man moved towards Armando, who, although he had an imposing figure, was sturdy and fit, as he believed in regular exercise for his body. He became a barrier in front of the stepfather, extending his hand, and the man ran into the open palm. Taken aback by the unexpected strength and resistance to which he was not accustomed, the man slowed down. Who are you? You come to my house and start getting handsy? And who are you? I came to see the girl and her mother. What? Carmen managed to get a lover? Without even leaving her wheelchair? Well, there will be hell to pay for her. The drunkard's eyes were bloodshot. Listen, man. Huh? The man looked at the doctor in confusion. Apparently, the fumes of alcohol had not left his not very intelligent head. If you start a fight, I will kill you, warned Dr. Fuentes. You're getting conceited. This was followed by a stream of profanity as if this creature of a man didn't know any other words. Armando didn't bother listening to the end of this angry monologue and struck the rude man in the face. He didn't try to use all his strength, but it was enough to send him flying back into the depths of the kitchen, spinning his head in confusion. He wanted to get up and start a fight. "I won't warn you again," commented the surgeon. The alcoholic didn't understand. He had to be hit again to make it clear to him that this guest was not someone he could handle. This wasn't about beating up a disabled woman and her daughter. Armando picked up the man by his shirt, in which he continued to sit among his phlegm and cigarette butts. Behind him, there were battalions of empty bottles, as if the man was displaying them for a parade. Actually, they were the main utensils in this kitchen. "Now listen up, dummy. The rules are changing from now on. Are you ready to listen?" He was not ready and tried to resist again. The result was a split lip and blood from his nose. Armando Fuentes hit him neatly and correctly, making sure not to break or damage anything unnecessary and not to injure his own hands, which still had surgeries to perform. "Are you ready now?" Indistinct murmuring sounded like agreement. Fuentes nodded and continued. "Then remember a few simple things that will keep your fat body safe and sound. Firstly, you will never again raise your hand to a girl or her mother. It's a shame you didn't think about how pathetic it is to beat the defenseless." The man grumbled dissatisfiedly but remained silent, and blood dripped in 2 streams from his nose onto his shirt. "Secondly, I don't want to see this mess. You, yes you, will make sure this dwelling shines. Aren't you ashamed to turn an apartment into such a bug-infested place?" He muttered and shook his head. Armando shook him harder, nearly splattering his beloved coat with drops of blood, and the man nodded in agreement, as if to say he understood. "Thirdly, you will no longer make Esther beg. If you want to eat, you go and work. The girl shouldn't have to work for a healthy, useless man like you." This time there was no objection. And the surgeon released the heavy body, which instantly collapsed to the floor, but then stirred and disappeared into the bathroom. He looked back at the girl, who looked at Armando like a princess at a kind dragon who had just eaten all her bullies. The child couldn't believe this was happening. And even Dr. Fuentes couldn't believe it was he, a doctor accustomed to saving lives by fighting diseases, who had just beaten, albeit someone who had sunk to the bottom, but still a human being. Do no harm, however, the doctor thought. "Take me to my mother, Esther," the surgeon asked. The girl almost sprang into the next room. Mom, Mommy, we have guests." A ringing and joyful child's voice echoed through the apartment. She was probably afraid to say that extra word, Fuentes thought. He wanted to believe in the best, otherwise, why bother starting anything? He walked into the room and stood like a statue. "This can't be," he whispered in amazement. Looking at him was a middle-aged, pretty woman with a worried look, physically exhausted. Bags under her eyes, shabby home clothes, and overall an unattractive appearance. But if you look closely, it's definitely her. The doctor looked as if he had seen a ghost. That's how one looks at their first love, at something warm that can never be regained. But Armando Fuentes' love was only one, and not long ago she had cheated on him and divorced him. But this woman was familiar to him from his professional activities. He had operated on her not long ago, but for some reason, the woman did not recognize him. "Hello," she said. Her voice was similar to that of the patient he had operated on a year ago. The operation had been complex but successful. The doctor remembered such things involuntarily and almost forever. He could now name any surgery he had performed and recall its peculiarities. He remembered this woman too. "I'm sorry, but I operated on you a year ago," said the stunned Dr. Fuentes instead of greeting her. "As far as I remember, you recovered quite quickly. And now you're in a wheelchair? How did that happen?" The woman looked at him as if he were crazy. "Sir, what are you talking about? Who are you?" "Mom, this is Armando. He paid me for my drawing," Esther began to explain, but her mother stopped her with a gesture. "Wait, dear, let Armando and me talk without you. Here, take the money, run to the store for bread." The woman handed her daughter a handful of coins. The girl took the money and disappeared into the hallway. The woman looked at her daughter and then stared at the Dr. Fuentes. Please explain. I see you for the first time, Armando. What operation are you talking about? I've never had any operations before. Yes, I have problems with my spine, as you can see. But I don't have the money to get treatment, Carmen said. Armando paused. There were inconsistencies in the story. He remembered that the stepfather called her Carmen when they entered the apartment, but the patient's name was Emma, he thought. Another inconsistency was their different social status. The surgeon was surprised that wealthy Emma came to him at a public clinic instead of a private one, as rich people usually do. But she was strongly recommended to him as an excellent specialist, which was a frequent occurrence in Dr. Fuentes' surgical practice. I'm sorry, I must have been mistaken. You just look very much like one of my patients. It happens sometimes. My name is Armando Fuentes. I'm a surgeon. Maybe I can help you, Armando said. Why would you do that? Carmen asked. To be honest, I don't know. I can only say that Esther helped me make my life brighter with her drawing. She has talent, and it shouldn't go to waste. Let's call it a call of conscience, if you will, the doctor explained. Well, not the worst explanation. Even despite all this mess, Carmen looked around the apartment, hinting at the mess that surrounded them. Okay. In short, I was going through a difficult divorce, and Esther's drawing pulled me out of my autumn melancholy. Now it's your turn. Esther said you're an orphan? Armando asked. Oh, she's such a chatterbox. She'll spill everything. Carmen pretended to be offended. She looked out the window at the gray heavy sky and the distant factory chimneys with sadness. She sighed and began her story. I think my life can be called ordinary. I'm an orphan. I spent all my conscious childhood in an orphanage. When it was time to go out on my own, I got a job at that factory over there. Everything was like for the residents of the nearby neighborhoods. I saved up for an apartment, and there was a fiancée. Esther was born out of love. We didn't get married to the fiancé. Why bother, they say, in our unsettled times when everyone gets divorced. And then the fiancé waved his hand and disappeared into unknown places. He even quit his job and left town. Turned out he wasn't ready for fatherhood. So I raised my daughter alone. It was hard, but I managed. It was my decision after all. But 6 months ago, I was walking in the evening. Streetlights work only occasionally here. Maybe that's why the driver of that off-roadster didn't see me. Anyway, I was hit. I'm alive, as you can see. But it's not much use. So you don't have any special income? Only expenses. And this, she pointed to the door, takes everything and drinks it away. I hoped for a man's shoulder, but got a bottomless man's throat that doesn't offer any help. If it weren't for Esther, we would have starved. I can't kick him out because I'm disabled and still lose to a healthy man. And it's up to us with my daughter to try to reason with him. So we're enduring this calamity as well. Don't worry, you won't have to endure it anymore, the doctor smiled. Well, that's good to hear. Because I don't have the strength to endure this anymore. If it weren't for my daughter, I would have already. You don't need to say that. You're not a little child, but a strong, adult woman. Armando interrupted her. Yes, you're right. Carmen, let's make a deal. I'll leave now, I have a lot of work to do and unfortunately, little time. Your partner will have time to tidy up the apartment and bring it back to normal. Don't worry about that. We, agreed. I don't want to give you false hope, but I'll see what else I can do to help. Don't lose hope, we'll dance together one day. Armando Fuentes encouraged her with a smile. Carmen responded with a pale smile. She didn't believe, but wanted to hope. On his way out, he met Esther, who had just returned home with bread. He stopped, petted her on her head, and gave her a few bills from his emergency fund for a rainy day, which he decided to use for a good cause. Give this to your mother for groceries. I'll come back to visit you on the weekend. Look after her and don't forget to draw. Just draw whatever you like, okay? The girl nodded and hugged his hand. Armando, don't go. I have to, baby, I have to. Don't be afraid, everything will be okay. I believe you, Armando. Esther smiled and closed the door behind the departing guest. Fuentes pondered the striking similarity between the wealthy patient and this woman in a wheelchair. Coincidence? Coincidences are not random. But even in an orphanage, they don't separate siblings. This contradicted Armando's understanding of ethics. And yet, despite all his idealism, the doctor allowed for such a possibility. As soon as he got to work and had a free moment, he dug through reports from a year ago. A crazy idea had come to him and he decided to try to implement it. Looking through medical records, the surgeon found what he was looking for. Emma Nogues. In the photo, he saw the same woman who was in the wheelchair today. The difference, however, was in character. In the photo, Emma looked daring, confident, and stubborn. No sadness, distrust, or oppression. In other words, they could well be sisters. And this added intrigue to the story, the gears of which he, Fuentes, had set in motion. He was curious to see how it would all end. Finding out the address of Emma Nogues' residence, Armando Fuentes took his first ever day off and surprised almost everyone he had worked with for many years, giving them fodder for gossip, considering his recent divorce. The medical profession has its undeniable advantages. For example, if you save someone's life, they will be grateful to their savior with a very high probability, unless they are those who are accustomed to swinging their rights and demanding, but not thanking. Luckily, Emma turned out to be one of those people who wasn't spoiled with wealth and social status. Therefore, when she saw the doctor at her doorstep, she was simply surprised. Armando Fuentes, hello. I didn't expect to see you. Hello, Emma, the man said reasonably. Of course, a hospital is not the kind of place where people are eager to return. Oh, don't be like that right away. Good people are always welcome in this house, especially if they come with good news. Are you bringing good news? Emma replied. If you're concerned about your health, then I have no news at all, strangely enough. So it's up to you. I have a different question. You know, you didn't intrigue us like this in the hospital, Emma smiled. Come in and meet my parents. We're having a small family dinner tonight. Oh, that's perfect. Blanca Nogues and Manolo Nogues turned out to be a mature married couple, and they reminded Armando of his school teachers. Their intelligent appearance, manners, and articulate speech revealed that they were brought up in cultured families. In reality, however, they were businessmen who owned not huge corporations, but stood firmly on their feet and turned over multimillions. However, they weren't arrogant, and they accepted him as an old friend. Although, in essence, Armando Fuentes was a stranger to them. While they were having a dessert, a conversation started. Mom, it was specifically Armando Fuentes that was recommended to me. He's a crystal clear person and simply talented, Emma advertised him to her mother. To be honest, we have heard a lot of good things about you and your operations, Manolo remarked. I just like helping people, Armando modestly replied. And you're also known for that, for your selflessness. In our time, where money is everything for most people, it's a rare thing, Emma added. Unfortunately, that's true. But as they say, we were born to turn fairy tales into reality, the doctor said with a smile. I have a little story for you, gentlemen. It's short, but I think you'll find it interesting. Go ahead, don't keep us waiting, Emma flashed a look at him. And Armando told the story of his acquaintance with an unusual girl and her family. When he got to the part about the stepfather, Emma interrupted him. I hope they won't arrest you. No, remember, I'm a surgeon. So, the most interesting thing happened when I saw a fox in person. Now, take a deep breath and get ready. Are you ready? I saw you, Emma. At first, I even thought it was some kind of joke. After all, it's impossible for a rich, successful, and, above all, quite healthy girl to suddenly find herself in a dirty apartment with an alcoholic man, let alone in a wheelchair. If this is a joke, you've intrigued us. But the humor isn't great, Manolo spoke up. Imagine how I felt. After all, it's not normal for one person to be in such opposite states. But it was real. I started reminding her of the surgery a year ago, to which Carmen, the girl's mother, only widened her eyes. That's when I became suspicious and decided to confirm or refute it by coming to you. Mom, Dad, I know you adopted me from the orphanage, Emma suddenly spoke up. The parents exchanged glances. They were clearly embarrassed about something. Where did you find out, daughter? Well, you should have hidden the documents better. The girl laughed. How long have you known? Manolo's spirit sank. Since school. I didn't tell you so as not to upset you. My teenage rebellion went unnoticed, if you remember. And besides, I love you both very much. You are the only mom and dad I have, and I owe you everything. Blanca's eyes sparkled. Thank you, darling. Thank you, Mom and Dad. So my hunch was correct, Armando said. Carmen is your twin sister. But that can't be, protested Manolo. We adopted only one Emma. You know the rules, Doctor. We can't separate siblings. We didn't break the law. Manolo, I'm not accusing you of anything. I just want to uncover the truth, how it all happened, and I hope you'll help me with that. And you'll get it. We are now interested in understanding how it happened. I think we can go to that orphanage and find out the truth. Well, not today, but someday. Yes, and then I would like to talk about another matter. But not now. I'll leave now, as I have a lot of work to do. When would be convenient for you to visit the orphanage, Manolo? Leave your personal number, I'll call you and we'll arrange it. They were only able to get into the orphanage a week later. Dr. Fuentes had a difficult period with a large number of surgeries. Almost every day, someone critically ill was admitted and the doctor had to save their life urgently. In the breaks between saving patients, the surgeon thought about the little girl and Carmen, whether they were safe with their stepfather or if he had considered the danger over and started mistreating them again. He couldn't understand why the fate of this little family had become so close to him. After all, they meant nothing to him. The talented girl artist and her unlucky mother, an orphan. The sudden influx of patients ran out, and Armando Fuentes allowed himself to take a day off for the second time. It was Friday. Manolo Nogues was waiting for the doctor in his car outside the hospital. Hello. The businessman shook the doctor's hand. Welcome. They'll be gossiping about me even more in the hospital now. It's like a real chicken coop, not a hospital, Fuentes said. Why would they gossip about you? Asked Manolo. I went through a divorce last summer. Now they gossip about it and wait for me to urgently find someone to be my partner, as if living without a woman is impossible, Fuentes complained. Wait, are you saving Carmen because you like her? Manolo smirked. What are you talking about? No, I'm married twice. The first wife left, and the second one is always with me. My second wife is surgery. And it's mutual love, Fuentes replied. Okay, let it be as you say. I agree that a profession becomes a calling if you, as you put it, have mutual love. But I don't understand one thing, Manolo said. What is it? Why don't you like to earn money with your talent? Well, my first wife said the same thing. She's right in her own way. She's right, but she knew who she was marrying at the time, Fuentes said. Yes, I'm honestly amazed at the nobility of your soul. As you can see, I've tarnished my soul with business and this unpleasant situation with the sisters, Manolo said. Well, nevertheless, you are at least trying to fix it. Yes, moreover, I want to use those papers that you hate for the benefit of the girl who can't walk. Carmen. Would you be able to get her back on her feet if I provide everything that's necessary? It would be an honor for me, Manolo. Well, then let's consider it settled. And here's the orphanage. They arrived at a building that looked like a massive government construction, pressing down with several floors. It was unpleasant to look at. Fuentes thought that living in it would be even more unpleasant. When they arrived, they found out that the former director had long retired, and the young one was happy to help them in. You're saying that the twin sisters could have been separated? The director asked in amazement. Unfortunately, it was discovered after all these years, Armando interjected. Well, maybe. Although it's strange for me to hear such a thing. There are rules, and I don't understand what would make the former director separate sisters, the employee muttered more to himself than to the visitors. No wonder he had only recently taken this position, and starting his career as a director with such a scandal would have been unpleasant. And let him be innocent, but the predecessor's actions cast a shadow over the entire service. The motive of the former director is unknown to us, but what we need to know is the truth. Don't worry, we have no claims against you or the orphanage, said Manolo. Look up the adoption date of Emma Nogues, he continued. Yes, one moment, here it is, replied the man. Now, look up the girl named Carmen with the same birth date. The employee nodded understandingly and shuffled through the papers, his face becoming serious. Indeed, here's the record. One date matches completely. Now I'll check it against the arrival date. The men patiently waited, although they already knew the answer to their question. They understood that everything would be confirmed. The doctor was the first to break the silence. Excuse me, I'll distract you for a moment. Where is the former director now? If you wanted to restore justice, you're a little late. The former director died about 6 months ago. His heart couldn't take it. And if it turns out that he really was involved in separating brothers and sisters, I won't feel sorry for him at all. That's unforgivable cruelty, in my opinion, replied the employee. The director showed the record, and everything was confirmed. Emma and Carmen were indeed blood sisters. Manolo paled. What Blanca and I have done, he murmured. You didn't know, Armando tried to reassure him. Yes, we didn't know, but the director asked us if we were willing to adopt 2 children. Blanca and I were clearly not financially ready for this at the time. So we refused. But the director interpreted it his own way, explained Manolo. That damn master of destinies, exclaimed the new leader, his anger visible. It was clear that he meant it sincerely. Thank you for your help. Goodbye. Manolo and Armando said goodbye to the director of the orphanage and hurriedly left the premises. Emma was clearly anxious. Armando placed his hand on hers to calm her down. The ride through the industrial ghetto had impressed the girl, and she was already worried about her sister's condition, whom she had no idea existed just a week ago. You know, Armando, my conscience is bothering me, she confessed. But why? It's not your fault, Emma, he replied. But it is. Because it could have been her in my place. I owe everything to my parents. They raised me, educated me, and gave me a start in life. If you say that we look like 2 peas in a pod, then the result would have been the same if she were in my place. You may look alike, but your characters are different. Perhaps you are right in your own way. However, we cannot change the past. But we can change the present and the future. Well then, let's change it. Wait, let me say something important, and then we'll start, okay? I'm listening. I haven't been with them since the very first day, so I don't know what the situation is like there right now. Furthermore, I don't know how Carmen will react to your appearance. I didn't warn her. In general, we are going to surprise them, like a bolt from the blue, so to speak. Therefore, let's be extremely careful with the girl and her mother. They have already suffered enough. Okay, I'll try my best. The difference in upbringing between Carmen and Emma became apparent as soon as the doctor and the businesswoman entered the entranceway. Emma wrinkled her nose in disgust at the sudden unsightliness of her sister's living space, but quickly suppressed the feeling and confidently stepped over the threshold. Well, and what a stink. Congratulations, Emma. You have experienced the aroma of moonshine, chuckled the doctor. Please let me go ahead, and I'll show you the right apartment. They climbed the stairs and tried to ring the doorbell. It didn't work, so they had to knock. An unfriendly voice responded from behind the door. Who is there? Someone. Open the door, man. Muffled cursing could be heard from behind the door, but their stepfather still opened the door. He retreated to the kitchen with a displeased look on his face, not even looking towards the doctor who had entered, and didn't notice the lady who followed. He would have been very surprised if he had. Apparently, Dr. Fuentes risked damaging his hands on the stepfather's face for a good reason, as the apartment had indeed been transformed into a cleaner state. Yes, the walls were still dirty, but cigarette butts, spit, and various trash were gone from the dwelling. As for the bottle batteries of the man, the doctor didn't get a chance to evaluate them as the bear retreated into his lair in the kitchen. Esther burst out of the room to greet the guests when she heard a familiar voice. Armando, is that you? I thought you weren't coming anymore. Oh my God. The child's eyes widened as she saw a copy of her mother, richly dressed and, most importantly, walking steadily on her own feet. The woman smiled at the girl. Hello. You're Esther, right? And I'm Aunt Emma, your mother's sister. See how much we look alike? Yes, only you're not in a wheelchair. The creature of disbelief still made her look at everything new with caution. Will you show Aunt Emma your drawings later, Esther? And me too. I missed you and your mom, Dr. Fuentes interrupted. Armando, I missed you too. I'll bring my drawings right now. Okay, little baby, bring them to the kitchen. And don't tell your mom anything. Let Aunt Emma tell her herself. The girl dashed into the living room and came back to the hallway with a full album, took Armando by the hand, and led him to the kitchen, where her stepfather was waiting for the storm to pass. They didn't try to chase him away. Emma let out a heavy sigh, like an athlete before taking the test, and went to the room where the girl had just come from. Man, don't worry, I won't hit you anymore, Armando reassured the grizzly bear. You did everything I asked. Esther, did he not hurt you anymore? No, Francisco is not angry anymore and even quit drinking. He cleaned up the apartment. Thank you for curing him, the girl delivered her verdict. Francisco smiled crookedly. Well, Dr. Fuentes was clearly innocent in this. I'm Francisco, he extended his paw. Armando. Really have to thank you. I was wrong, it was my alcohol addiction. You know, Francisco, I can understand everything except for hurting the defenseless. But, for example, aren't you ashamed of making a child beg? I'm ashamed, but after drinking, I was ready for anything, to be honest. Yes, I understand that I'm a scumbag, but look around, where do we live? We? Well, you live in the apartment of those whom you beat and forced to work for you. Please don't argue, interrupted the little artist as the two men were in the midst of their dispute. Instead, look at my drawings. I've filled up the entire album in just a week. The doctor began to examine the young child's artwork closely. The animals were still there, but now they were depicted in adorable scenes rather than fights, drunkenness, or arguments. The bear with a broomstick even had a smile on its face. And the bunny sitting on a balcony, admiring the birds and the sunshine, was simply delightful. Fall wasn't providing much sunshine, and most of the birds had flown to warmer climates, so Esther was transferring her mood onto paper. The child was happy to create a bright image of her mother. Armando, your mom was waiting for you. She was waiting, and I was drawing, she said. The doctor chuckled as he looked at the picture. The fox had put her hands on the windowsill, rested her head on them, and smiled, revealing all 32 of her teeth. The picture was warm and inviting, and it touched the doctor's heart. Then he saw himself as a toasted, long-eared rabbit walking along the riverbank in a hat and a cloak. To add to the mystery, the little girl had given him sunglasses. "Do I really have such big ears, Esther?" Armando laughed. The little girl smiled shyly. "Armando," came a voice from the adjacent room. One of his sisters was calling him. It was clear that they hadn't talked much, but it was also clear that they had both been crying. Carmen looked helpless and doomed, but with hidden joy, while Emma seemed even more confident than before. The doubts that had plagued her in the car seemed to have disappeared. "Armando, you've already done something incredible, judging by your actions and their consequences in the past couple of weeks, but I have another question for you," Emma said, collecting her thoughts and waiting for guidance. "Go ahead." "Carmen, I'm sorry I didn't come in to say hello. I think I would just be in the way right now," Armando replied. She blushed and lowered her gaze in an attempt to hide her modest smile. She was very embarrassed about everything that had happened. Just a week ago, she saw only one way out of all the troubles that had befallen her, and now she had hoped for a relatively normal life and a sister. Having a loved one meant a lot to an orphan. "Doctor, I remember how well you performed the operation on me. I have a question regarding whether you can do the same for my sister." "The cost is not an issue for me. Carmen needs to learn to walk," she said. "I will do everything possible to make it happen." The doctor replied firmly. "Carmen, how are you feeling? Are you ready for treatment?" "I'm ready to try. I'm just afraid that I won't have anyone to leave my daughter with. I don't want to see Francisco anymore in this apartment or in my life. Maybe he has changed, but I won't forgive him for his past mistakes. And I definitely won't leave my child with him." Their stepfather stood silently in the doorway, and every word hit him like a punch from Dr. Fuentes. Seeing her wealthy stepdaughter, he had hoped that they would be able to live in wealth with Carmen's help. But instead, he was being treated like a beaten dog. He was hurt, but he knew he was in the wrong. "Forgive me, Carmen. I was a jerk," he muttered and left the room. "Carmen, if you're willing to trust me with your life, I can handle your child as well. Besides, Esther can visit you in the ward during rounds. I'll take care of that. I'll cover the expenses for our young artist," Armando offered. "Well, now the only thing left is to actually make it all happen since we've agreed on it so smoothly," Emma summed up. As they said their goodbyes and Emma dropped off Dr. Fuentes at his home, she asked on their way out, "I still don't understand why this means so much to you, Armando." "Good deeds don't go unnoticed," the surgeon smiled a bit sadly. He didn't even know the answer himself. Esther turned out to be a clever girl and didn't cause much trouble at all. The only issue was having to drive her to her old school since there wasn't enough time to transfer her to a new one. She knew how to take care of herself, warm up food, and keep the house tidy while Dr. Fuentes was at work. She also turned out to be a studious child, spending her days drawing and reading books that the doctor brought her almost every day. Her eager for learning inspired the doctor since he was just like her as a child, except he wasn't good at drawing. In short, there were no problems with the child, but there was plenty of help needed since the house became alive for Armando instead of just a box with furniture he slept in. As for the girl's mother, Carmen, she surprisingly recovered well from the operation. From Dr. Fuentes' medical practice perspective, the problem was quite typical, and the treatment algorithm was well established. Therefore, he was confident during the operation, and his hand did not shake. It took 5 hours in total, which Carmen slept through peacefully. Then there were a few months of rehabilitation when Carmen had to learn how to walk again. Esther teased her mother that it was now her turn. Could the single mother, who was once an orphan, have ever thought that a crowd of relatives would come to visit her during her time of need? They were strangers on one hand, but they regularly visited her and took care of everything for her from start to finish, even though they were not obligated to. In the evenings, she quietly cried tears of joy into her pillow, as she did in the orphanage, so that no one would hear her and consider her weak. Days went by, autumn turned into winter, and then the real spring came. Carmen also experienced the thaw while in the hospital. For her, the window still showed a world that barely changed towards warmth. She entered the hospital in the gray, chilly autumn, but left in blooming April, as if she reborn to life. Carmen felt like a migratory bird that returned from faraway lands to its homeland and wanted to sing and dance, although the doctor did not prescribe the latter. By the way, the doctor was walking next to her, arm in arm, and was also content with life, as if there was no melancholy that brought such different people together at one time. I don't know how to thank you, Armando Fuentes, for everything you've done for me. You saved me from a dismal existence and from admiring the crows in my apartment near the industrial zone. The revived patient began to chirp. I remember. Carmen. You told me that every day. But now you can thank me in one way, the doctor smiled. How? A dinner is being prepared in honor of your discharge, to which we have been invited. Emma also mentioned that she would like to introduce us to her young fiancé, who appeared a month ago. Can you imagine how many good things are happening at once? But I don't even have anything to wear, the patient blushed. Well, we have a whole day to fix that sad fact, and the money I saved, replied the doctor. Armando, I don't know how to repay you for all this. And most importantly, with what? Carmen, did I ever ask for you to return me something? Esther and I agreed to trade drawings, and when it comes to finances, I'm not picky. Even with a doctor's salary at a state hospital, I managed to save a considerable amount every month. And now, the excess has piled up again. Let's go spend it. Do you like evening dresses? What are evening dresses? The woman joked. I've never worn one. Your time has come, he replied. After that, Fuentes, Esther, and her mother spent the whole day shopping and buying all kinds of silly trinkets. Esther begged for some paint, as she wanted to try a new drawing technique. Carmen chose a gorgeous dark blue dress that highlighted her slim figure. And Fuentes was in awe of the woman he was with. If a stranger looked at this trio now, they would be sure that an ordinary family had gone shopping on the weekend. Armando felt truly happy. Not like after a surgery when he was tired and drained, but genuinely happy. He wanted to spend the time this way indefinitely. After the clothing shopping tours ended, the trio dropped by an amusement park, where the little girl got her first taste of the thrill of riding a carousel, then a Ferris wheel, and jumping on a trampoline. The happy child was inspired for the year ahead. By evening, they were all exhausted from the day's adventures, but still excited enough to go visit someone. Emma and her mother Blanca did their best to prepare a unique festive dinner. The table was set with delicacies as if it were not a modest evening but a rural wedding that would last for several days. At least the attendees would not be able to eat everything prepared for this evening. Everyone was waiting only for Emma's boyfriend. The girl, like a close friend, talked about her young man as a bright personality, also a businessman who had achieved everything on his own, without the help of his parents. He was assertive and pushy, that's the trait that helped him win her over. They were partners in a related field of activity, so their future union promised not only great and pure love, but also business development. Here comes Raul. Emma clapped her hands like a little girl who had just received a Christmas present. Carmen, let's go meet him. Let his eyes run up. Carmen supported her sister, and they went down to the courtyard. Both were beautiful and well-dressed, with Emma wearing a red dress as red as fire, and Carmen wearing a calmer blue one. The parents were also anticipating the arrival of their daughter's chosen one. When Carmen saw the black off-roader, she froze. It was the same car that hit her. She noticed the car's number with her peripheral vision. This couldn't be. It was a shock for the barely recovered woman. Are you okay? Emma noticed a change in Carmen. Not really. What happened? I can't say, or... Speak, don't keep me in suspense. Emma, that's the car that hit me at the crosswalk. Carmen, that can't be. I remembered it clearly back then. I have the impression that you're just jealous, little sister, Emma tried to make a joke. Meanwhile, other guests came down to the courtyard for dinner. Manolo admired the car and couldn't help but express his admiration for it during acquaintance. "Nice ride, Raul. But how reliable is it?" he asked. "It's a great car, Manolo Nogues. The last maintenance was a year ago and it was just minor. They fixed the bumper," the handsome young man said enthusiastically. "They call people like him masters of their lives." "What happened to the bumper?" "Oh, a dog ran onto the road and I couldn't brake in time," Raul explained. At that moment, Carmen spoke up. "What a coincidence. Exactly a year ago, I was hit on a pedestrian crosswalk by the same off-roader." The young man turned pale and fell silent. The girl then recited the license plate number of his car. Raul was shocked and had nothing to say, as it was truly him. He couldn't deny it and could only groan quietly. "I don't remember anything," he said. A deathly silence fell. Emma now believed her sister. Subsequently, Raul wrote a heartfelt confession about drunk driving and hitting a pedestrian under pressure from Emma and his parents. He paid compensation to Carmen, lost his driver's license, and the affection of the girl. As for Carmen's future, she was with Dr. Fuentes. They began to spend more and more time together every day until they realized they had become a family. Esther was thrilled with this and quickly started calling Armando Daddy. This was an unusual status for a surgeon, and he experienced another kind of happiness being a father. The girl continued to develop her talents, and when she finally entered art school, the teachers were amazed at how a self-taught artist could unleash her talent. They predicted that she would win awards and have exhibitions in the future. The girl laughed quietly and said that she had a unique source of inspiration. Her paintings were inspired by cute family portraits of animals, and the fox stood out with its noticeably pregnant belly.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.